The unmoved mover, trying to prove God's existence based upon motion. Maybe the easiest argument to prove wrong, says everybody everywhere. Except everybody everywhere seems to completely misunderstand this argument. Okay, so this argument seems to be the easily dismissed, it's kind of dumb, by everyone from Richard Dawkins to, you name it, Christopher Hitchens, to great scholars on all different walks. Even a lot of Christians think that this argument doesn't necessarily work. Unfortunately, I disagree, and I think that once it is better explained within the context in which it was presented, I think you might see a little closer to the way that I see it. So let's actually walk through what this argument is. But before we do, let's figure out who Thomas Aquinas was and what he was trying to do. So Thomas Aquinas lived in the 1200s, great theologian, great thinker. He used a whole lot of Aristotle, and he loved him some Jesus, and so he decided to talk about a whole lot of that stuff with Summa Theologica and Summa Contra Gentilis. How in the heck do you say that? A lot of different stuff that he wrote. In fact, there's even a legend that he was writing 4 books at one time, and he had to dictate it to 4 different scribes, and so he would dictate the sentence to the first scribe first, and then the first sentence to the next scribe, and then the first sentence. So he's doing that for 4 books at the same time. True or not? Probably not true. I hope to God it's not true, because that would mean that I suck as a human being, and always will. So I'm going to say that Thomas Aquinas maybe, yeah, he was really smart. Dang, I'm never going to reach that, but that's okay. So let's talk about what he was trying to accomplish. It's funny that we make so much of a big deal about his 5 ways or his 5 proofs for God's existence, and a lot of it was really just taken from Aristotle, which is not a bad thing, and it only takes up maybe like a page or 2 in his text, and yet we put so much attention on it. That's the irony of it. Well, but he also really didn't have a lot of atheists in his day that he had to kind of defend God's existence to that mindset. So he really didn't expound upon it too much, and a lot of it seemed to be self-evident, at least to his mind in the presentation of it. Okay, but what does the argument actually say? Good question. So let's walk through it. Point number 1. Everything in the universe is in motion. Yes. Everything in the universe is in motion. Now, you might think that chair over there is not in motion, except it's on the Earth, which is rotating pretty rapidly, which is also going around the sun, again, pretty rapidly, and the sun is part of our galaxy, going pretty rapidly. And then that galaxy is careening through the universe. All told, you're around 1,000,000 miles an hour at all times, and that's if you're standing still. So yeah, everything is moving, without a doubt. Everything is in motion. Okay, so I guess that's not a contentious point. Cool. Number 2, whatever moves must have been moved by something else. This also seems to be a bit of a common sense point. So for instance, if you think about setting up dominoes, you flick the first domino, it hits another one, hits another one, hits another one. And it seems to be this concept of something hits something else and it causes a chain reaction. So it's kind of like saying everything's in a chain reaction. The concept of a butterfly flapping its wings across the earth can create a hurricane doesn't really mean that, but the butterfly effect, you get the point. It deals with this whole concept of a cause and effect relationship. Something is in motion because it's being moved by something else, directly or indirectly, or combination thereof. Not really a contentious point for the most part, so we'll move on. Number 3, there cannot be an infinite regression of movers, for that would mean that nothing was ever moved in the first place. Again, moving back to the dominoes, you always got that first domino that got flicked over, and once it got flicked, then everything happened. Without that, you don't really have the motion. And therefore, we know that there must be an unmoved mover, something that is not in motion that caused all of the motion, and there you go. So someone to flick over the dominoes, if you will. That's the presentation that is typically given, and that's the presentation that has a very easy problem with it, a very easy problem to point out. Point number 3 is the issue, or at least the biggest issue. There can't be an infinite regression of movers? Well, David Hume asks, why not? Why can't there be an infinite regression of movers? If the universe has always existed, then there is an infinite regression of movers. Everything has always been in motion and bouncing stuff around, and all of it's moving around for an infinite amount of time. It's always been that way. Why does it have to have some sort of an unmoved mover? In fact, you've never seen anything in the universe that is unmoved or that is not in motion. Therefore, everything to you is in motion. What makes you think there has to be something unmoved to cause all this motion? Well, Mr. Hume, that's a great question. And this is the main reason why this argument has been seen as LOL, right? Except that's not really getting at what Thomas was trying to say. This is not a linear progression. That's not what's being dealt with here. When he says motion, he's not talking about cause and effect, this moved this, that moved this, moved this. He's talking about order of magnitude. In other words, what has the power of motion? What has the ability to cause motion versus doesn't have the ability to cause motion? It's more of an abstraction of the concept, if you will, so follow me here. When we're talking about motion, you might express it like this. What is the default state of all things, all that exists? What is the default state? Motion or non-motion? Now you might be tempted to say motion is the default state because everything is always in motion. Except that would not necessarily be true. For instance, even our laws of physics indicate an object stays at rest until acted upon, which means the default state is actually rest. The default state is non-motion itself. Motion cannot be the default state because you know it's a default state when it requires no explanatory power for why it is in that state. So if we say that airplane is moving and I were to ask why is that airplane moving, you would give me a sufficient reason as to why that airplane is moving. You would give me a reason that explains fully what is causing the motion of that airplane. If I asked you why is that galaxy moving, you could give me all of the reasons and the factors that determine why that airplane or that galaxy is moving. If you could explain why it's moving, then it requires an explanation. If there's an explanation for it that sufficiently explains it all, then it's not the default state, by definition. The default state has to have no explanatory need whatsoever. So, if I say, why is that not moving? You would have to look at it and say, it's just not moving. Right, but why is it not moving? Because it's not moving? Because nothing caused it to move? Nothing happened? Interesting. So if the default state of all things is non-motion, if that's the default state, then the question is, why is everything moving? Why is it infinitely moving? If the universe is infinitely old, you have to explain infinite motion. How could it possibly be infinitely moving? The only answer you could give that would have the power to cause infinite motion would be an infinitely powerful, unmoved mover. If the universe began to exist, well, you already have a problem if you're an atheist then. But see, what's so great about this argument is Thomas Aquinas actually did not necessarily believe the universe began at some point in history. He seemed to be more on the side of, it's always been. Yes, theists and Christians have been on the side of, the universe has always existed. And this argument proves, if the universe has always existed, then it requires an infinitely powerful, unmoved mover to be the cause or the explanation for why everything is infinitely moving. In which case, this argument actually is quite profound, and I would argue has never, ever been disproven. All they have disproven is a straw man form of this argument. So, I ask you in the comments, does this argument work? Does this make sense? How would you try and disprove what it is that I have just said? Can you do it? Do you think it's a compelling argument in today's world? Is it compelling to you? Why or why not? Leave it in the comments below. Thanks again, and I will see you later.